So you came across a wonderful deal for a chuck roast and you're trying to figure out what in the world to do with it. Or you got one from the farmer in your meat box and you're trying to figure out what the world to do with it. And the first thing come to mind is pot roast. And you're like, I'm so sick of pot roast. So the first thing I do when I get a chuck roast is go ahead and cut it up and then think of a different flavor profile other than plain old pot roast. All right, so here is a very nice thick chuck roast. Pretty good price for it too. So I'm going to cut around this nice fat cap that's running down the middle and get all of it chopped up, and then we'll come back to it after I get my hands all cleaned up. All right, so I was able to get the meat all chopped up and I'll show you what is left, and then I'm also starting to cook a little bit. So this is how much we got left. I kept some fat on, as you can tell. Some pieces are fattier than others, and then the fat pieces that have meat on it that was hard to separate, I threw those in here. My husband will munch on that when I finish frying it up. But for the big chunky fat pieces, they are in a bowl and I'll figure out what to do with those. One thing came to mind about those extremely fatty pieces was really to just throw it in the trash. I know if you have animals, they will particularly love to peck at that. I'm not quite sure what animal will eat the fat. I don't know. I don't have animals yet. That's one day on the checklist. But for the beef that we are thinking of, we like to go Asian before we go typical Americana. And that's because beef stew, I think we're bored of it. We've been eating it our whole entire lives, right? The carrots and the potatoes. But we love to do what is called shaken beef. And it comes from, I believe, Vietnam or Thailand. Don't quote me. But I got a recipe from a friend who's been cooking it since her mother taught her as a little kid. So I believe that's where I might go with this. But another option is if you got this from the market or from a farmer and you don't want to eat it now, it's time to put it away for the future. Let's talk about that. So this is a pint freezer bag, and next to it is a pint jar. If you have pint jars and you want to freeze the food and not can it, you can still put the meat in the pint jar. If you don't have jars at all, feel free to use a freezer bag. So for instance, we can do what is called raw pat. So basically you're dropping the meat down into this jar. You don't want to push on it too much. Turn it around a little bit so you guys can see the back side. That's about as good. That's about good. You're going to want to add seasoning to this jar. Any kind of seasoning. You can do a squirt of balsamic vinegar. You can do a squirt of soy sauce, coconut aminos. You can do dry herbs like basil, parsley, paprika. You can just leave it plain, a dash of salt. Doesn't matter how you want to season it. Think of the variety of ways that you're going to eat it in the future, and that will kind of steer you in a direction of how you're going to season it. For us, we can leave it plain, and it's fine with me because when I dump it out, any broth that came with it, I'll season the meat and the broth separately. But this is one way that you can definitely get a roast in your freezer. Can this jar go in your freezer? Absolutely. If you got some extra tops, peanut butter tops, you can put it right on the top. If you actually have the lid that this came with, and you can fill it with a little bit of water and stick it right into your freezer. I will not fill to the top with water. So this first ring that you see, this first ring right here, on average from here to the very tippy top of the jar is 1 inch. So you only want to fill it with water or broth to that 1 inch mark. and you can set the whole jar in the freezer. That way when it freezes and it rises, you have an inch worth of space. But yes, you can freeze in your canning jars if you have jars, but do not have a pressure canner. We received about 3 bags of beef bones. This bag has already been rinsed through, and I'm going to roast them in the oven on this baking sheet. So you guys can do this if you would like. Some people just don't rain water. I like to roast them. It helps with the fat, helps some of the very liquidy loose fat to kind of fall off, and then that way they'll rise to the top while it's boiling, and you can skim it or scoop it right off. So as many batches as it takes, you're going to roast them as close to 400 degrees as possible, 500 if your oven will allow it, for barely 10-15 minutes. You don't want it fully cooked. One of the simplest ways you can make your beef broth is in the crock pot. Dump in some apple cider vinegar you saw off to the side, any kind of seasoning. Or you can put it in a big stock pot like I'm doing here. I just cover it up with half an onion, some garlic, still left in its peels, a glug of apple cider vinegar, and I just let it simmer all day long. Hi, Grammy. It's fun watching my grandmother play with my son. For him to have his great grandmother in his life means so much to him. Thanks so much for dropping by the channel today, guys. I hope you're able to clear out your freezer, get those bones in a crock pot. Any bones will work, but today we focus on beef because we need to make space for everything that we'll be storing up this summer and fall. I hope to see you guys soon. Take care.